Hi, this is the Module 11 video, and let's get right to it. You're going to read Spring Chapter 11, Ravitch Chapter 8, Darling Hammond Chapter 8 this week. In Spring Chapter 11, there's a corresponding PowerPoint as usual, and I try and pull out all the important aspects of this particular chapter. Um, there's a lot of interesting things that happen across history, and if you're a big history buff like I am, you'll find a lot of this information very kind of cool or interesting in the fact that it's happened before. I mean, I think you'll see a lot of in history you see a lot of recurring themes, a lot of recurring um, events that seem to create similar responses sociologically or throughout society anyway, societally. Anyway, so in Spring Chapter 11, he talks about how teachers' unions came about. It really, I guess, I don't know how to, let's see, in Georgia and in much of the South, because of the history down here, unions did not become popular, and there's reasons for that, but I won't go into those, but they're interesting reasons. However, in the North, of course, they were very, very important and very popular. And with the feminization of teaching that you learned about earlier and all of these things, women were pretty much believed to only be teachers until they got married and had children. It really wasn't seen as a career until later on. It becomes a career. Women are in the workforce more. Women gain the right to vote in 1920-ish, around there. And things change. It becomes a profession, and they want to keep it a profession. So teachers unions become important. So in the PowerPoint, make sure you watch it in slideshow mode, and you can click on some of the little pictures in the PowerPoint, and it will take you to a few links about two of the major organizations, the AFT, American Federation of Teachers, and how that came about, and then the NEA, the National Education Association. Now, the National Education Association was originally sort of just a professional organization of teachers and superintendents and educational specialists and professors and these types of things, teacher educators. It changes. I don't think it changes until about the 1970s, but you'll see some changes starting to happen. Anyway, so it's an interesting layout that Spring does of all of the different tensions that are happening in society at the time. And another big tension, of course, happening during this time frame is the Great Depression. The Great Depression and any economic, recession, as you've recently seen in 2008, which I'm hearing being called the Great Recession. So anyway, any of these economic issues or events in history are going to affect, obviously, how we deliver education in the country because of the constraints on funding, and the constraints on the financial sector of the country obviously is going to affect the rest of the country. I mean, just recently, we experienced, even when I was still teaching, I believe, because I quit teaching in 2010, and we had furlough days that we ended up basically just having to eat days, and we didn't get paid for them, and that was to help make up for the budget deficits that were there because of the lack of funding, and how that particular element, the banking and the housing going kaput and sort of blowing up, how it just rippled through the rest of the economy and affected all of us. So obviously the Great Depression was a great deal larger and bigger. 25% of the country was unemployed at one point. So obviously, how does this affect education? Well, obviously during this time frame too, you've got FDR, you've got his alphabet agencies, organizations taking over. You've got the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps, you probably heard of, and the NYA, which is the National Youth Association, I think. Anyway, so you're going to see a lot of these different organizations come about to help regulate. This is when big government really starts to happen and starts to take control of a lot of the elements within society to try to regulate it so that this kind of thing doesn't happen again. Anyway, what ends up happening is this big tension between education and federal government and control, and who's going to have the control. So the NEA, as a professional organization representing public education and teachers has been fighting for many, many years to have the federal government come in and help control and regulate and give more financial aid and just assistance in general to standardizing and regulating, the educational system. But, of course, anytime you have an organization asking for more help financially, what does that mean? That means they're going to probably want more control as well. So it's this sort of power struggle between, the experts believing that they should handle educational, curriculum and structures and institutions and these types of things that affect all of this, but they just want to be given the money to do it. So, it's understandable that the federal government would say, well, wait a minute, we're going to want a little bit more control if we're going to give you more money. And so the CCC and the NYA were actually educating older children. They were, older teenagers, mainly boys in the CCC. And it became sort of a threat to how the educational structure would go. And I think you'll learn a little bit about that in the PowerPoint and in the chapter. So I'll back off on talking about that particular chapter. But again, I think that one of the main ideas here is that with economic constraints, sort of a conservative backlash kind of takes over. And of course, all the business people want to cut as many programs as you can, cut. All of this funding and a lot of programs that are involved in education at the time, including kindergarten. I mean, there are lots of things suggested. And obviously with that kind of economic constraint, you get a conservative response. And with a ultra-conservative response, you are often going to have sort of the correlate to that, and that will be sort of a radical left type of response. And this is when the social reconstructionists, if I dare call them that, they get a really bad rap. I mean, they were progressives. They were really trying to do good, I think, for the country and good for the educational system. They were labeled communists, they were labeled socialists, and in some of their efforts, they were very socialist. But again, this was during a time frame when socialism and communism hadn't really been proven to be as ineffective as it was. Anyway, that's just another little piece of history and where education sort of falls into it and that kind of thing. So you'll learn a little bit about that. Now in Rabbit, she talks about the trouble with accountability. She gives a very good overview of what No Child Left Behind, what NCLB considered accountability. And she's talking about an accountability in this chapter. So even though this book is from 2010, it's a little bit dated, because when you talk about accountability nowadays, you're talking about all kinds of different things that go with that. And one of the big ones right now is holding teachers accountable with student test scores. So that's a big push in accountability right now. And I won't get into that right now, but just understand that her perspective is a little bit before this. I think she may talk a little bit about that in this chapter, but she mainly stays on how standardized testing becomes the only measure of success. There's no human judgment. There's no professional judgment involved. It becomes what the states, how the states hold success of a school, to be. So, and unfortunately, some of the reactions to that, and that is, the gaming of the system that she talks about, and it's interesting. Okay, Darling Hammond, chapter 8, Organizing for Success. She talks about, this is where she kind of puts up her ideas about what will be successful. In the previous chapter, she talked about how to make teachers the best that they can be, and now she's talking about how to make the institutions, the school structure, and individual schools, and how to organize them in a manner that will make them successful for all students. Equality of opportunity and equality of access, all of these things kind of rolled together. And she bases it in, of course, the literature, in the research. You're going to watch some excerpts that I found on the web. I couldn't find the entire movie. Maybe it's out there now, and if it is, somebody needs to email me. Simple Justice is a very, very interesting movie. In my face-to-face class, I show the actual movie in class, but I could only find excerpts to show you online. I think you can purchase the movie, on Amazon if you choose to do that. But there's 6 very brief excerpts. They're 5 to 6 minutes each, I believe, and I give you the link to the first one, and then you can easily find the next 5. But this is a really, really interesting story of how Brown v. Board of Education comes about, and the 13-year fight that takes place prior to it, just to gain enough momentum and to fight all the legal battles that had to fight to set the precedents to get to that particular precedent and to overturn Plessy v. Ferguson. So it's a really interesting dramatization. It's not a documentary. It's a dramatization of how, they go about fighting for this. And you'll see some interesting characters, played out in the excerpts. Okay, you're going to, I don't think I have you're going to turn in your Schools and Film critique essay. Make sure you turn that into the Dropbox. Make sure that it's in APA format. If you have any questions about APA format, please contact me. Please take that part seriously. And what else about that? Make sure you, just general things, proofread it, edit, spell check, just all the basic things that you would do. I mean, it will definitely help your argument, your thesis get across. And then because of all of that, I did not assign a discussion prompt this module. So you're going to be turning that in instead. So I think that's it. You remember to be working on your research, hopefully, for your critical issue project, because that's going to be due in a few weeks. And I think that's it. I'll see you in the next module.